Okay, that's okay, great. So we're going to look at the different aspects of the literature review. So scoping the review, so how we can use AI to help us map key debates and authors. Then moving on to source discovery, so how we can locate and validate literature. And then once we have our literature, so how can we use AI to assist with summarizing and synthesizing, and indeed, is it possible to do that? So looking at how we can cluster sources by theme, by theory, or by method. And then finally, moving on to critical evaluation and synthesis. So checking citation integrity and using AI outputs as synthesis. So they're kind of our key areas of our literature review that we're going to work through this morning. So there'll be lots of practical hands-on activities as we work through the training. We'll be talking also quite soon about prompt strategies and what are some of those best ways that we can prompt our AI to get the best results that, really will help us do the best job that we can with our research. And thinking always about ethics within research practice, but particularly I think when we're using AI with our research, and what does that look like? So the learning outcomes, I'm not going to go through them again. They're on the slide, and they're also in the course overview that you signed up for. But these are going to be what we're working towards in the next few hours of our time together. So I just want to tell you a little bit of background about me. So I have a PhD in health psychology from the University of Queensland here up in Brisbane. I also received a Dean's Award for outstanding PhD thesis for that, which I was very, very proud of. My main work is as a researcher and educator. So I'm actively involved in research. I work across a number of teams and different projects. And I also work extensively in education. So the education that I do, a lot of it is around qualitative research methodologies, but also I work at QUT as a casual academic. My areas of research are around health and sexual health, and I also work quite extensively in the domestic violence space. And there's some of my research interests on the slide. And before I did my PhD, I spent about 10 years working as an ESL teacher. So that's, if you don't know, teaching English as a second language. So teaching is really my first love. But I absolutely love research and I love theory. So this work enables me to bring those passions together. AI is obviously such an emerging area. And, as someone who's really dedicated to integrity and ethics in qualitative research, I think it's a really important area, for us to consider and us to explore. And I think personally with any debates that present themselves as a dichotomy, I think they lose the nuance. And so what we can see is people, saying AI is absolutely incredible. We can use it for absolutely everything in research. And then we have another kind of school of thought or other scholars who are like, oh no, AI is terrible. Like we shouldn't be using it at all. And, my philosophy is it is definitely a nuanced area. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So we want to be able to, use AI in our projects to assist us in ways that really free up our brains for thinking about those other tasks, and also to speed up the time that it takes to do some of these tasks. So really thinking about the efficiency and how AI can be used in ways that really elevates our research, but also making sure that we're always maintaining. One of the things I'll be talking about is cognitive sovereignty, so that we're always maintaining that cognitive sovereignty. We're always making sure that we're treating AI as an assistant, not as the person who is running the research, because we have to remember AI is not a person. But that's a bit about me and my interest in research and working in this particular area. So what I'd love is if people were happy to type in the chat box. Your name will come up, so that's fine. So just your university or your institution and discipline, the research you're involved in doing, and one thing you love about your work. So it's always really nice to, if we had a bit more time, we get people to verbally introduce themselves. But given our technology nightmares this morning, we'll just ask people if they'd like to type in the chat box, that would be amazing. So just your university or institution and discipline, the research involved in doing, and one thing you love about your work. So I'll leave that there, and I'll encourage people to, to please type in the chat, because it's always really interesting to hear what work other people are involved in doing. And I think, research can be quite solitary. So any opportunity to bring a group of researchers together is always fantastic. And I think as well, hearing what people love about their work, it's very inspiring. But what it also highlights is that I think regardless of the field and the discipline we are working in, that there's going to be the same things again and again in terms of, what is it that we're passionate about doing as researchers. And I think we can really see that, when people share what they love about their work. So yeah, I'd really love to hear if people are happy to type in the chat box. So yeah, I can see some responses that are super interesting. And I think it always just really excites me reading what people are working in. And so thank you so much for sharing. And again, I would encourage others, if they haven't, please to share, and also just have a read of the other people in the room. So in the chat box, what are the different areas that people are working in? What do people love about their work? And we can really see those crossovers. What often happens as well in training is, when you're either listening to other people in the room or talking to other people in the room, reading the chat box, whatever it is, that you'll be aware of people who are doing research that, may be similar to yours, or someone who you're like, oh, I actually really want to connect with that person. After the training, swap email addresses, have a chat. So it's just also a really good opportunity for a bit of networking, which is always really nice. Again, as I said, research can be a little bit solitary. So I think we should always, take advantage of these opportunities just get to know other people within our research community. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to move on and just have a look, first of all, when we're thinking about what we mean by AI. So when we're talking about AI, often we're talking about large language models. And so, usually AI, it's kind of become a bit synonymous with particular tools, like, for example, ChatGPT. But basically what we're talking about is computer systems that are designed to perform tasks that usually require human intelligence. So what they actually do is they rely on statistical patterns, and they're predicting what is most likely, and that is based on the data that they've seen. Okay, so again, just remembering that it's really important. It is based on prediction. There is no interpretation of the data. There's no, understanding. There's no nuance. It is literally a computer system that is giving you back information. It's responding to you, and it's based on a prediction. Okay. And how the prediction is being made is based on the data that they've already engaged with. So it's not a singular thing. There's actually a landscape of different tools that are relevant to our work as researchers. As I said, the first one is a large language model, and that's often, has kind of become shorthand, or, kind of ChatGPT has become shorthand for AI. So this is AI that's trained on massive data sets of texts to predict language patterns. And again, it doesn't understand meaning. It identifies statistical likelihood of responses based on the patterns that it's seen. So tools like Claude and ChatGPT are great for summarizing, for drafting coding, and, for writing scaffolding. So, for all different kinds of things. And this can pertain to our work as researchers. It can also pertain to things, in our personal lives. Obviously, AI is becoming, incredibly prolific in terms of how people are using it. And, there's a lot of people using it in terms of, therapeutic ways as well. So there's a broad range of uses. And that's not suggesting, that they are necessarily good or bad, but just kind of stating that these are ways that large language models are being used. We also have specific tools. So like literature tools, so for example, Perplexity and Elicit. So with Perplexity, it's blending AI with a live search. And so it includes references with links. It's really fast, but it's also quite surface levels. This can be really good for sourcing literature that we're looking for. A tool like Elicit works with semantic scholar data. That's great for things like tables and filtering research by things like, methods or samples or limitations. But we're going to be looking at those in more detail a little bit later. Then we also have different types of AI that can be used to assist coding and early analysis. So, for example, Quality GPT, which is a particular GPT within ChatGPT that can be useful for exploratory theme detection. And then we have types of AI that are more geared towards writing. So things like Gamma and Tome, and they can be really useful for things like drafting extracts, memos, and reports. So really, I suppose to remember that when we're talking about AI, we're not talking about a singular thing, but we're talking about a whole range of different systems. And there's a landscape of different tools that can be relevant to our work and that are being used in lots of different ways. Now, I am aware there's comments in the chat box, so I will attend to those in a moment, but I'm just going to continue on here. So when we think about qualitative research, and I think it's important if we're talking about AI and qualitative research to actually situate these two things. So qualitative research is fundamentally about meaning and meaning making. And so what we are doing as qualitative researchers is we are working with, people's interpretation of the world, and we are making an interpretation of their interpretation. Okay, so we are trying to understand how people experience and how people make sense of the world. Okay, what meanings do people make? Qualitative research at its core is fundamentally a human endeavor because if we're talking about big Q qualitative research, what that basically means is big Q. You may have seen that in the literature. That is qualitative data that is embedded in a qualitative paradigm. Okay, so a qualitative ontology and epistemology. So big Q qualitative research is fundamentally a human endeavor because we value subjectivity, we value reflexivity, we value the researcher's interpretation. So everything that we're saying about a piece of data or a data set, we need to be able to provide evidence in the data. But nonetheless, we recognize that within big Q qualitative research, we also value subjectivity. So qualitative research is rooted in subjectivity. It's rooted in context and complexity. And it's also rooted in nuance. As we know, we often work with small, rich data sets, interviews, observations, focus group documents. They're kind of core areas of qualitative research. Again, recognizing that the researcher is not neutral. So while within a quantitative paradigm, we're aiming for, objectivity, within a qualitative paradigm, we are recognizing the researcher is not neutral. We're recognizing interpretation is key to the process of being a qualitative researcher. So our interpretation is shaped by our positionality, it's shaped by our values, and so therefore we need to engage in reflexive practice. But really the key kind of point here is recognizing that within a qualitative paradigm, the researcher is central to the research process. So I suppose if we consider both of those things on the last two slides, and we're thinking about then, AI and qualitative research and how these things fit together. So we just have a really simple table here. So we're looking at the left, we're saying what AI can do. So it can recognize patterns, and that's what it's incredibly good at. Okay, so predicting based on statistical likelihood and recognize the patterns. It can understand language, but when we say understand, not understanding in a human way. Okay, understanding as in it's being trained to make those predictions and suggest likelihoods. It can make suggestions, therefore, and it can generate text. What it can't do is it can't know. So it doesn't actually know anything. Again, it's all about prediction. It's all about statistical likelihood. It can't actually understand. It can't think. It can't feel, and it can't interpret meaning. Now, I don't know how people in the group today use AI, but I know for me, I do actually use a paid version of ChatGPT, and I have lots of different system prompts for lots of different things, both professionally and personally. And I do find myself sometimes, basically asking ChatGPT, what do you think? Or kind of, I suppose, fundamentally asking for an opinion, which of course, it can't actually do. And that brings us to our next slide. And what I want to draw your attention to, first of all, in this slide is the third point down, which is about cognitive sovereignty. So what I basically mean by cognitive sovereignty is when we're thinking about our cognition, our ability to think, our ability to know, our ability to problem solve, to think through, to make decisions, I need to maintain sovereignty over my cognitive capacity. I need to maintain sovereignty over the decisions that I'm making, recognizing they are my decisions and I am an active agent in that process. So when I was mentioning before that sometimes, I would use particular GPTs for, particular things I might say, what do you think? This is a question I keep coming back to for myself. Am I maintaining my cognitive sovereignty? So when I'm saying, what do you think? I'm not really asking what it thinks, but what we can see, and it might be a good point of reflection for yourself, what you may notice over time with using AI is you can notice maybe a kind of a slippage where you start slipping into losing your cognitive sovereignty, thinking, oh, AI could do this better than I could do it. I'll just ask it and I will almost defer to what the AI thinks. Okay, so I think it's just a really good yardstick to remember this idea of cognitive sovereignty. Okay, so the question is who is doing the thinking? And we're asking ourselves how we're actually using AI. Okay, so who is doing the thinking? Are we doing the thinking? Is the AI doing the thinking? And then we're also asking, where is the responsibility? So if we are using AI to assist us with our research and it gives us output and we are using that output then in our research, who is responsible for the claims? Who is responsible for that output? And, we're not going to talk today in our training about actually analyzing data. But for example, if we are using AI to assist with our analysis and we're putting that out into the world, who is responsible for those knowledge claims? So they're just really important questions. Another thing to highlight with cognitive sovereignty, our brain is basically a muscle, okay? And so when we're using our brains, when we're critically thinking, we are building those muscles, we're strengthening our critical thinking skills, okay? If we are outsourcing our thinking, our muscle is going to become weak. So it's like anything. If you do 50 push-ups a day and I say to you, can you do 50 push-ups? You will be able to get on the ground and do 50 push-ups for me pretty easily, hopefully. If you don't do any push-ups at all and I say to you, can you do 5 push-ups for me? You're really going to struggle. Okay, so exactly like the muscles in your body, your brain is a muscle. So just keep bringing it back to that cognitive sovereignty. Who is doing the thinking? And make sure we're not over time, like actually losing our skills and outsourcing, our thinking to AI. So just the first point on this slide, thinking about epistemology. So this can be pronounced epistemology or epistemology. I'm Irish, in case you didn't guess by my accent. In Australia, it's typically pronounced epistemology. When we're talking about epistemology, so these are two, like epistemology and ontology are two really core concepts within research. And basically what we're talking about here is, what is it possible to know? So that's our ontology. What is it possible to know about the world? And our epistemology or epistemology is then how do we go about acquiring that knowledge? Okay, how do we go about acquiring the information? And so if we think about the fact that AI is responding based on statistical likelihood, what we can recognize here is that AI has a positivist logic. Okay. And so when we're talking about a positivist logic, so I'm going to bring out my little dinosaur to just kind of help explain this really quickly. What we're talking about here is that there is an actual truth. Okay. So if we look at this dinosaur here, I can say there is an actual truth. This is an actual dinosaur. Okay. So we're talking about an objective reality. So if AI is working with statistical likelihoods, what we're asking it to do is we are asking it to find something that already exists. Okay, find me the answer in the data. Give me the answer. Okay, so that is a positivist logic. Positivist because it is recognizing an objective reality, which basically means the answer is already there. What we're getting AI to do is extract the answer. That's really different to interpretation. Okay. So when we are talking about that big Q qualitative research, we're talking about subjectivity, we're talking about meaning, we're talking about complexity, we're talking about that human interpretation. So we can recognize that there's a bit of an incongruence there between those two different epistemological positions. So when we're talking about epistemic humility, and it is a bit of a mouthful, but what we're recognizing here is thinking about the fact that AI generated outputs are not actually neutral truths. Okay. Because what the outputs are shaped by is patterns in training data. They can also be shaped by dominant discourses and norms. So if we're thinking about, whose voices get to be heard, whose voices are elevated. So what it can actually do is, again, if we are asking questions of our AI, and again, it's talking about generalization and prediction, and that's how it's producing this output for us, we can be unmeaningly reproducing inequality. We can be reproducing dominant narratives, dominant norms, elevating voices that are already getting heard and marginalizing voices that are already marginalized. So it's just really important to recognize that we are not, we're not rejecting AI, but we are being cautious and we're being critical in terms of the output that it is giving us. Okay. And recognizing that, again, it's attending to patterns, potentially dominant discourses, dominant norms, and it's not actually doing any kind of interpretation. So therefore, that kind of leads us into then the question of, well, how are we to use AI and what kind of role can AI have? So I think some useful terms here is to think about some of these metaphors. So thinking about like AI, for example, as an intern. Okay, so imagining you have an intern in your job. So you've got someone who's assisting you with say, an analysis or your literature review. If your intern says to you, hey, look, I've done this work and this is what I found, are you going to trust exactly what the intern has said and go, yeah, that's fantastic? Or are you going to then check what the intern has done? You're going to check what the intern has done. Okay. You're going to get the intern to act as an assistant. So what are some of those key, it's system-based tasks I can get the intern to help me with, but I'm not going to be, again, outsourcing my cognitive sovereignty to the intern. So we are, again, prioritizing our interpretation, our ethics, and our judgment. Also thinking about AI like a mirror. Okay, so I got and it didn't fall. I don't get 7 years bad luck, which is a lucky one. I don't know if people even still say that, or maybe it's an Irish thing, who knows? But thinking about AI as a mirror, okay. So what it's basically doing is it is reflecting back. And so let's say, for example, if you have set up a system prompt in, say, ChatGPT, or you're using a particular thread, you've given it information. What it's going to do is it's going to, one, reflect you back what you've given it, but more broadly, it's going to reflect back dominant discourses and biases. Okay. So again, remembering it is not understanding. Another way to think about AI is like an amplifier. And so here I've got a magnifying glass. So thinking about it as magnifying. So yes, it absolutely helps us accelerate our workflow, but it can also magnify blind spots, and it can also magnify assumptions. Okay. And so when we are talking about magnifying blind spots and magnifying assumptions, you again shape what gets amplified. You shape that through the content that you feed it. You shape that through the type of prompts that you give your AI. Okay. But recognizing it's going to amplify particular things. So, what it's never giving you is, even if we're talking about that positivist space and we say there's a singular objective reality, although we say it has that kind of underpinning of a positivist logic, the reality, the objective reality it's giving you is simply in line with what it has been fed. Okay, so it's got all of this data and it's feeding back to you what is the most likely response from the data that it's been fed. So again, just to kind of touch on what we're going to talk through in our specific focus on literature reviews. So scoping and discovery. So here thinking about using AI to help us map key debates and authors, and to help us locate and validate literature. So here is really, the beginning of our literature review. What we're aiming to do at this point is build a high-level understanding of a particular field, identify key debates, influential theories, and major contributions. Using AI can help us clarify the scope of the review by surfacing recurring themes, conceptual frameworks, and lines of inquiry. So here we can really use our tools, and we're going to look at all of these in detail. This slide is just to provide a bit of an overview. So here we can use AI to explore the breadth of an area quickly. But again, we need to use our own judgment to assess depth and relevance. It can help with the development of initial search strategies, things like keywords and guiding questions. And we can also combine exploratory prompting with source validation. So checking if papers are credible, if they're current, and if they're methodologically aligned with what it is we're looking for or striving to do. So again, thinking about this question of dominant narratives and dominant norms, we need to be paying attention here to whose voices are dominating in the literature and what perspectives might be overlooked. So our next area that we'll be looking at is our organization and mapping. And then we'll be moving into exploring relationships and gaps, and then our citation integrity and reflexivity. And we're going to work through each of those as we get through these 4 stages of our training. Just thinking really broadly with the literature review, what AI can and cannot do. So scan large volumes quickly. Absolutely can do that, but it cannot evaluate nuance. It can extract. I think extract is a really useful word to think about with AI. Extracting frequent topics or terms, but it's not going to be detecting contradictions or shifts. It can suggest related sources, but it can't guarantee the accuracy of citations. So just remembering that you are the interpreter, but AI is the surface reader. Okay, so again, thinking about it like an intern, you've got an assistant, a research assistant who's helping you. There's particular tasks that you'll get them to do. You'll check over their work. So using AI in the same type of way. Okay, so I'm going to get you to do a short activity. So just thinking, first of all, about mapping your workflow and thinking about your literature review. So have you already, or do you plan to use AI in your literature review process? Now, there's also I know the slides were shared this morning. There was also a short handout, which just gave you some space to write responses to these answers. So if if you want to write them in your notebook, or I don't know if people keep a research journal, really, really good practice. If you do, it might be a good place to record some of these answers, or indeed on the handout, or if you just want to talk through them, that's fine. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, into just small rooms of maybe 2 or 3 people. Have a quick chat. I'm literally going to give you maybe 4 or 5 minutes to talk through this. So if you've already, or do you plan to use AI to assist in your literature review? So if you've already used it, what's your experience been? If you plan to use it, what do you plan to do? So what is the task? What tools, again, either you have done or you plan to? And what is your role? So again, if we think about this idea of AI being like an assistant, what do you plan your role to be, or what has your role been, or what's your experience of that being like? So I'm going to open up our breakout rooms. And so we'll have about 3 people, 2 to 3 people per room. So I'm going to pop people in the breakout rooms. Yeah, just take a moment to obviously introduce yourselves. I'll set the timer for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll have a quick chat. Yeah, about what you discussed. Okay, so we're getting people back to the main room, which is great. So before we get people to share, or see if anyone would like to share, what I would like to do is, let me just reduce that.
Can you help me, please?
Let me just share. Where am I?
I will compensate. Okay.
Okay, so I just would like to have a look at the next slide. Sorry, I'm just gonna, if people could just pop themselves on mute, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, can everyone see that slide?
No, I don't think we can see the slides.
Okay, sorry, let me let me stop sharing and I'll reshare. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, great. So I just want to introduce this tool as a point of reflection for using AI. So when we're talking about, again, cognitive sovereignty, epistemic humility, and making sure that we are the person who's actually owning the knowledge. So just using this as a decision making tool to assist us in making those decisions about how we're using AI. So first of all, so using the acronym FRAME. So first of all, the F is for fit. So thinking about, does a tool align with your research paradigm, with the type of literature, and with the review goals. So we're kind of tailoring this to doing a literature review, okay? The role. So what role is AI taking? What role are you taking? So is AI supporting your analytic process, or is it displacing your role as an interpreter? Also, I'm thinking about accountability. So can you stand by the accuracy and interpretation of any AI generated output? What about any claims or citations that you have made? So have those been verified? And so one of the things that we can see happening quite frequently in the contemporary world where people are doing research is that sometimes claims are being made or citations are being used and they're not actually accurate. Now, I don't know if people are aware of what recently happened with Deloitte. So they were doing a report for the government. The government had paid them like $440,000. The report was produced, and then it transpired that a number of citations were fabricated. Also, that a particular legal case had actually never happened. So, we do have this propensity of large language models to hallucinate. So when we are thinking about the kind of claims that we're making or citations that we're using, are we making sure that they are actually accurate? Okay, because again, it's our name who's on the piece of work. So just really making sure that we have that ownership and that responsibility over what it is we're producing. Thinking about meaning, so does AI preserve the nuance, the context, the theoretical position of the text that it's summarizing? And also, again, bringing back in our hallucinations, so thinking about risks like citation hallucinations, bias, or misrepresentation, and thinking about how we're managing those. So again, I don't want this to sound like AI doom and gloom and that we're saying, we shouldn't be using AI. What we need to always be mindful of is recognizing that there are risks. What are those risks? How are we managing those risks? Okay. Is it suitable for what we're doing? What role am I taking? What role is the AI taking? Where does the accountability lie? So again, remembering always that the accountability lies with us. So making sure that we can stand by what we're putting out into the world. Thinking about nuance, context, and theoretical position, and again recognizing that AI does those things quite badly. So that is where we really need to be making sure that we are very firmly in the research process, and again then thinking more broadly about ethics. So it's quite a useful tool that you can use for any part of your research, or indeed for using AI in lots of different ways. So I hope that is something that you might, start applying as you continue working with AI or begin working with AI. So I just want to kind of go back to the question that we had previously when we went into our breakout rooms, and this question of how are you planning to use AI, thinking about the task, the tool, your role in using it. So I would just be interested in anyone's reflection. If anyone would like to share, you're welcome to type in the chat box, or you're welcome to speak. And if, having looked at this reflective approach and thinking about each of those different elements, so the fit, the role, accountability, meaning, and ethics, if your answer to any of those questions might be different after thinking about these things. So yeah, I'd be really interested to have anyone's thoughts. So again, as I said, you can type in the chat box, or it's always really nice to hear people's voices. If you'd like to turn your microphone and share, that would be lovely. Just also with cameras on or off is totally fine. When you're presenting, it's always really nice to see people's faces, but I understand that's not always possible, or for a multitude of reasons desirable. So very welcome to have your cameras off, but if you would like to turn it on, that would be lovely also. Anyone like to share anything that you talked about in your chat?
Hi, Claire. I don't mind going first and sharing.
Great,
I
thank
think
you so
my
much.
camera on is just giving me a warning sign. But my name is Nishan. I'm a PhD student at the University of Canberra. We discussed two different types of tools. So the first one being ChatGPT, and the second one being Anara. And we did discuss specifically with ChatGPT the issue of hallucination and so that would fall into the ethics and also accountability.
Mhm.
It doesn't really interpret the data, and there is issues with accuracy. And you obviously need to verify the claims and citations afterwards as well. So that was mainly, as we discussed, to help with paraphrasing or rewording or really just the language stuff. So not
Yeah,
anything beyond that. And then we also discussed Anara, which is a paid tool, but that one's really good because it doesn't hallucinate. And the
okay.
idea with that is particularly useful for literature reviews because you can just upload all of the different research papers that you want to analyze, and you can put them all in one chat, and then it can generate themes, it can identify similarities, differences. It can identify all the research gaps. So it's really good to really synthesize the research. So yeah, we talked about those two because Inara would be really productive, and it has less risks associated with, particularly the ethics part that ChatGPT and similar tools might have.
Amazing. I've actually not heard of that tool. I've just written it down. And Nara, is it A?
Inara, A-N-A-R-A. I can put a link in the chat, but I
Yeah,
found it really
yeah.
useful. Yeah.
And that's, yeah, thank you so much. And that's what I find as well about doing, this training and talking to people about AI, because it is such a fast changing area. It's almost like literally day by day. Like when you talk to someone, someone's using a different tool, a different way of using it. So that, yeah, that's really, really fascinating. Thank you so much. And we will be talking about, later on in the training, tools for synthesis, but that's obviously a great one to have in our tool belt, and we can add that in. So when we come to that point,
Yeah.
if people want to have a look at that is absolutely fine as well. So thank you so much for that.
You've corrected.
Different types of tools. Probably haven't picked tools that are good fit for my purpose yet. Absolutely, and that's why as well this training is really good, Jackie. Just again to allow us just to kind of break down the different types of tasks and really thinking about what tools are going to be more appropriate for which types of tasks. And so we do have ones like ChatGPT, like those large language models that we can, in some ways we can kind of use for everything. But obviously we have specific tools that are focused on, different tasks, and we'll do those tasks a lot more effectively. So really, really thinking about how we can choose the appropriate tool for the research that we're doing, or the stage that we are at in our research. So sorry, just allow me to share this again. Okay, fantastic. Okay, great. So, okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about prompt strategies. Prompting is really, really important because if we think about, the kind of the basics of, garbage in, garbage out. So what you get out of your AI is only going to be as good as a prompt that you put in. And this is a really good, again, an acronym to use to help you develop better prompts. So the clearer the requests, the better the outputs are going to be. So using this acronym CRAFT, okay? So C is for context, R is for role. Okay, so what is the context of the research? Okay, what's happening? The role, what do you actually want your AI to do? The action. So it's when I started the role, what you wanted to do, what role do you want it to have? So what job title, if you're imagining, you're given this particular question to an employee, what would their job title be? What is the action? What is the format? Who is the target audience? Okay, so we've got an example there of a prompt that's using those different aspects of that craft prompt tool. And we've got some examples there of really poor prompts, basically. So write a literature review on AI, summarize this paper. So they're just incredibly broad. So if you give a crap prompt, it's basically going to give you back crap. And that's kind of the simplest way to put it. So if we just look at the craft prompt tool in a little bit more detail here. So again, the C is for the context to define the situation. Okay, so for example, again, if we're thinking about a literature review workflow, so supporting the planning and organization of a literature review for a qualitative research project. Okay, so we've been really, really clear. Now, just another thing to mention as well about prompts. So there's a difference between a system prompt. So if you have a paid version of ChatGPT, for example, or a large language model, you can set up system prompts. So basically, they're like each one is like a GPT all of its own. Okay, so the more detailed you can give you can make the system prompt, when I say detailed in an accurate way, obviously the better the output is going to be, the more the output is going to match what you're actually looking for, okay? So if you are creating a system prompt, go on the side of detail. So your prompt might be, it might be 100 words. If you are creating a prompt just for a thread, your prompt doesn't need to be so detailed. But for either a system prompt or a thread prompt, this craft framework is really, really useful. So what you're basically doing is covering all of your bases and thinking about what are the key things that it's really fundamentally what you're thinking about is what are your parameters, and obviously, we're researchers, so even if you want to think about it in ways like, inclusion or exclusion criteria, what do I want it to give me? What do I not want it to give me? So what you're doing here is you're really clearly defining your parameters so you are getting back what it is that you're looking for. What can happen as well here is sometimes, and I think this is one of the really interesting things with AI, sometimes we actually don't know yet what our parameters are. So we haven't really worked it out yet. And so we kind of think, I'll just put something a bit vague in and see what it gives me back. And one of the things with AI that we need to be so careful of is it always sounds really confident. Okay. Like it's got a way of sounding really confident, really authoritative. Okay. Like it knows the answers, like it is correct, like this information you're being given is accurate. So in some ways it can really fool us into thinking, well, this is right. Like, look at how this is written. This is correct. So remembering it's always going to sound that way. Okay. So you can put in like a really vague prompt or, not a very good prompt. It can give you back something. Again, it has that authoritative tone. But then when you read through it, you're like, this is just nonsense. Or this is just like, sometimes it can be just so much fluff. And I think we've all had that experience. You might read something, maybe 100 words, 200 words, whatever, and you're like, it's actually saying nothing. Okay. So being really clear about what it is you're looking for and designing your prompts in a way that are going to be as effective as possible. So that's our context, thinking about the broader context, what's the situation. The role then is defining the persona, okay, of your GPT or if you're using a different tool. So for example, act as a research planning assistant and you're telling them what you want them to have expertise in, okay? So what is the action? So you want them to, for example, help map out review stages, generate search term strategy, summarize key papers. What is the format? So what way do you want the output to be? So do you want bullet points, clear headings, whatever you want it to be? Again, state your output. And who is it for? So who is the target audience? So if it's for you, who are you? Who is the target audience? If, you're writing, for example, if you're getting it to help you write a newsletter, you're thinking about who is the target audience for my newsletter. If you're developing an infographic for, community engagement, again, who is the target audience? Who is the person or people who are going to be reading or engaging with this output? So even if you're developing an infographic or you're developing something for, a particular stakeholder group, and you obviously will be working on the output, you're articulating to the GPT that the target audience is kind of the end user, okay, who is going to be engaging with this. So it's really useful in terms of getting really clear about what you want the GPT to do. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is rewrite this vague prompt. So the prompt is, tell me about AI and ethics in research. Okay. And so using this prompt framework. So I know you have a copy of the slides, just in case, because I'm going to pop you back in your breakout rooms for a couple of minutes to give you an opportunity to have a go at this together. So I'll put that slide back up. So if people want to take a photograph of this slide, that can be quite useful. It definitely doesn't need to be a 100 word. I'm so sorry, Jackie, you said you didn't have, yes, the slides were actually shared this morning. So I'm, yeah, sorry that people didn't get access to the slides. I'll make sure everyone has the slides after the presentation. Yeah, and the handout, and I'll share the reference list as well. But let's work with what we have. So if you would like to take a photo of that framework, and then I'll pop you back into your breakout rooms. And excuse me, this is our question. So again, you might want to take a photo with this. Okay, so rewrite this vague prompt. So tell me about AI and ethics in research. Okay, so what are the things that you could tell your GPT that would mean that you will actually get the results that you're looking for? Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Everyone good with that? Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to put you back in for about maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll pull everyone back to the main room, and we can just ask maybe if people want to type in the chat box, we can share our prompts.
Hi, Claire. While other people are returning back, Monica here.
Hi, Monica, how are you?
So I just wanted to ask a question. So is there a way that we could restrict Copilot? That's what we use, Copilot, right? In CKU, to restrict the response to, let's say, 3 documents that I'm currently reviewing, rather than it going everywhere on the web and trying to bring different responses. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's literally just you creating a prompt to tell it exactly what you want it to do.
Yep. So is there a possibility of uploading files in ChatGPT, like the free version?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so, because I have the paid version, but I can double check that, but I think you absolutely can.
Monica, free version gives you limited access.
Yeah, but are you able to
for
upload?
uploading the files particularly, yeah.
So do you use the paid version, Imran?
Yeah, I do.
So are you able to, how many files are you able to upload at one go?
With the paid version?
Maybe I uploaded up to 18.
Okay. So does it then restrict the response only to 18 files, or it still goes everywhere?
Now, if you
If you
give the
tell it
prompt to restrict the response to those files, it will
exactly, it's making
It
your
depends on
prompt clear in terms of what you actually wanted to do.
Yeah.
But again, remembering that thing about hallucinations and fabrication. So just always checking the accuracy, and that goes for any AI you're using, making sure that you're checking the accuracy. But again, it's that thing about using a really clear prompt. So think about your prompt as defining your parameters. Okay.
Yeah, accuracy is a major problem. It skips many files. Yeah, I tried 18 articles, 15 articles, but when you ask to develop a table on key findings, it misses out many files.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't put in too many files, because if you put in too much information, it's just gonna, it misses things. Okay. So I think smaller is better. So what you could do is, groups of 5 or groups of 10. Personally, I wouldn't use any more than 10 documents at the same time, but being really clear about what you're wanting it to do, but remembering that you're checking that for accuracy.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, we might just pose that question and we might just go back to this activity. So I'm just interested how people get on with this prompt. Would anyone like to share?
Yeah, I'll share our group.
Awesome, thanks, Jess.
That's okay. So very, very, very roughly. So for C, we wrote, you are preparing a literature review for your PhD. Act as a research planning assistant with research ethics experience. Identify accountability versus risks in research ethics. Prepare 2 paragraphs with subheadings, and the target audience is PhD students.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So if you're saying for your PhD and so just again thinking about, is it for your, like, whose PhD is it for? Is it for their PhD, and are they a research assistant? So just kind of being clear, yeah. And also as well, like, it might sound a bit silly, but I get even 2 paragraphs. Like, do you want it to be yeah, like roughly 2 paragraphs, so roughly 150 words each. So just really thinking about, because what can end up happening is you could end up almost having, I don't know if other people have had this experience, you can end up having this back and forth. And you're just like, and you're almost like treating it like a human. Like I've found myself in situations where I actually feel like I'm having an argument with it. And I'm like, that's not what I asked you to do. And then what's happening then is you're down some kind of a, excuse me, spirally kind of a rabbit hole. And you're getting further and further away from what you actually wanted. And so when we can be a little bit vague, what can happen is it can pick up on an element of what we've said and it can run with it that way. And then we're trying to kind of unravel and get actually back to where we wanted to be. So just really thinking about what we're always trying to do is set your parameters and then just thinking, is there any ambiguity in that? So can I be clearer? Because again, and this is again where I think the understanding piece comes in. If we were conveying this to another human, often they would understand particular nuance of what we're saying. When we're conveying something to AI, it's not picking up on any of those things. Again, it's predicting what we think we're wanting. And so we can end up kind of going in a spirally space.
Yeah, I tend to have that slight back and forth with Copilot, which is what my university uses as well. And you start with this vague few paragraphs, and then you go, okay, please condense 250
absolutely.
words, and then it's like an iteration process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so again, I think really what we're talking about here is thinking about when we are about to engage, what is the purpose of the engagement? Okay. So sometimes the purpose of the engagement is I'm not really sure about something. I actually want to brainstorm, or I want to think about keywords, or I want to. So what I'm actually looking for is I'm looking for back and forth. Okay. And so I think intentionality, I think with all aspects of research, intentionality is incredibly important. Okay. I kind of have this sentence that I always say, research should be deliberate, thoughtful, and explicit. Okay. So it's deliberate. So nothing we're doing is accidental. We're thinking through, we're really clear on what we are doing. It's thoughtful, we're thinking through the steps, and it's explicit. So again, we've always got that transparency with our work. And so really within that is that intentionality. And so thinking about if we're about to engage with AI, what's the function of the engagement? Okay. If it is to do that kind of iterative back and forth, which I actually find incredibly useful. And in that way, I use it a bit like almost like a conversation partner, like I would like, a colleague. And I'm like, oh, I've got to kind of work through this because we fundamentally know that qualitative research is iterative in its nature. It has to be iterative, okay? And so we can use AI in ways that kind of complement that and allow us to have that back and forth. So just being clear on, is that what I'm looking for? Or is it something really clear and I need it to be kind of boundaried? So thinking about the function of the engagement and then writing a prompt then that really kind of speaks to that. Cool, thanks so much. Anyone else like to share their prompt? Anyone from any of the other groups?
Yeah, I can share.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thanks, Imran.
Yeah, no worries. It's a bit long, but
That's
yeah.
okay.
So I started with the context support literature review on ethical use of AI in supply chain management because that is my key area of research.
And sorry, I love that as well because it's not, because if we talk about ethics and AI, like that's just so broad. Like how long is a piece of string? So you're talking about specifically within your field. So again, kind of narrowing down that scope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And act as a experienced author and researcher in supply chain management field. And then generate a summary table on the studies published between 2015 and 2025. And the target audience are the academic researchers and students in business management field, particularly in
Okay,
supply chain.
fantastic. Okay, great. So you've been really clear. Yeah, they're both great prompts. Thank you so much, Jess and Imran. They're really clear and really, really articulating what the boundaries and what the scope of the task is.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So we've talked about the beginning. We kind of said, okay, these are the kind of the phases that we're going to look at. Let's look first of all at scoping and discovery. So I kind of talked this at the beginning, so I'm not going to talk about this in much detail now. We're identifying concepts, theories, debates, and gaps. So we're exploring the depth of existing research, looking for commonly cited ideas or frameworks, search terms and keywords. Also looking at what are the areas of extensive research and also what are the areas of omission, okay? And this is really important because this basically shapes your literature search strategy and influences what you decide to include and what you decide to exclude. So if we were doing this kind of scoping and discovery work, what are the kinds of tools that we would be using and why? So first of all, we have our, excuse me, our ChatGPT, which is our large language model. So what is this good for? So great for things like summaries and comparisons, highly flexible, great with structure and supporting writing and formatting. What are some of the problems with it? So hallucinations, and hallucinations are not something that we can get away from. Because again, that is just part of how these large language models work. And it can be up to 20% of citations that can be hallucinated. So just again, making sure we're always checking. We can't check that verification within it and no real-time access. It can be great for brainstorming, refining search questions and identifying themes. Another really useful tool here is Perplexity. So we can do our search plus real-time AI summary. So it's great for source-linked summaries. It includes references. It's always, got that speed, which is fantastic. It can be weak on theoretical content and may miss nuance, but again, that is going to be the same with ChatGPT. So what's this useful for? So citation checking, scanning topics, and exploring unfamiliar fields. So we could also use here, let me just move that off my screen. Elicit is another tool that can be really useful at this stage. So Elicit is powered by Semantic Scholar. This is great for evidence synthesis or structured review. So Elicit's really good when you already have a focused topic and you want to compare studies by things like method, sample, or findings. Okay, so Elicit is not great for that broader debate mapping. So if you're doing that kind of broader debate mapping, Perplexity or ChatGPT would be really useful. Elicit is when we have got that focused topic and we want to then zoom in. Okay, so for example, we want to find and compare studies based on, method, sample, or findings, or we want to filter results by a particular year. So it can build us an evidence table that shows us how, for example, different studies are designed. So it's great in the organization and mapping stages when we're trying to group and understand different studies and how they relate to each other. So let's say we're doing a study on digital storytelling in marginalized youth. We could ask Elicit, for example, what methods have been used in studies on digital storytelling with marginalized youth since 2020. Okay, so again, we have a clear focus. Then Research Rabbit, which we're going to be looking at a little bit later, is for visual citation discovery and paper mapping. And it's really good for that visual representation of how networks and papers relate to each other. So really good for interdisciplinary topics. Again, the quality varies. We need to engage in that human checking. Another problem with Research Rabbit is literally you can fall down a rabbit hole. So you can find yourself kind of going off on a tangent, falling down a bit of a rabbit hole. So it's an incredibly useful resource, but that certainly is one of the potential drawbacks of it. But it's really good for finding, lots of literature within a particular field, and then all of those interrelated and interdisciplinary papers. Okay, so we're going to have a go at doing an activity. We might take a short break after this. Again, I am very aware that we started quite late, but I just want to make sure that people, if they want to grab a quick cuppa or go to the loo and just have a few minutes. So let's do this activity, and then we can take a short break. So we're going to use ChatGPT and Perplexity. Okay, so the task is scoping, so looking at key authors or key debates. Okay, so the prompt says you are a research assistant, map the key debates in the use of AI in qualitative research. Now, we can see our prompt is not great, first of all. So we'll come back to that in a moment. So the task is basically we're going to be asking ChatGPT or Perplexity to return 3 key authors and 2 key controversies since 2020. Okay, so we're clear on what we wanted to give us. We haven't told it what we want that to look like. Do we want bullet points? Do we want paragraphs? What do you want that to look like? What about our prompt? You're a research assistant, map the key debates in the use of AI in qualitative research. Is there anything we could add to that to make that prompt better?
Can we add any prompt to reduce the plagiarism?
So when you say to reduce the plagiarism, what do you mean?
Yeah, so usually if we generate anything through these AI tools, um, when we check the plagiarism, it shows a lot of plagiarism, AI written material or kind of thing.
So I think what you're asking then, how can you get AI to generate something that doesn't look like it's AI? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, if that's possible, yeah.
Yeah, look, I suppose what you could do is something like put it through something like Grammarly.
Mm-hmm.
So but I suppose the broader I suppose the broader ethical question, and this is just a rhetorical question. It's not a question directed at you or at anyone in particular. But if we're getting AI to give us output and we want it to not look like it's AI, if we're thinking about being transparent in our research, how does that align with our transparencies? That's just kind of an aside note. But if you were wanting to do that, you could get your output and then you could basically put your output into something like, and again, this would be like a paid version of something like Grammarly, where you can basically ask it to, you can say, here's the text, give it to me in this particular style, or give it to me that it's, it sounds less AI or whatever it is. So you'd be taking it from your large language model or whatever, and then you would be using a different tool. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Actually, usually we do not use everything from the chat GPT, but some things, for example, if we ask to develop a table or something like that, so even for that table, the software shows the plagiarism. So
Oh,
if we
look,
could get
absolutely,
something like that,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I get that there's situations where I think it's just like it's like with that those 2 frameworks I've given you. So one, the frame. So thinking about again that ethics and accountability. So just always thinking about when you're using AI, okay, working through those letters and think, okay, well, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And then using that the craft for developing your prompts. But absolutely, you could put it through. So something like Grammarly would be really effective for what you're looking for.
Claire,
Okay,
can I
so the
just jump
Grammarly
in?
gives the option to kind of rewrite, or how would it help? I never used it.
Sorry, once more.
So how would Grammarly help? So
Basically what you can do is you can ask it to give you different styles. You can give the
okay,
content into
different
Grammarly
style. Okay.
and you could ask it to give it to you in different styles. So basically it will fundamentally and when I say different styles, like there's lots of different styles. So it could be more academic, it could be more, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there's lots of different options for styles. So you could put it in, and what you're getting it to do is stay true to the core message and the meaning of the content, but you're basically changing how it's written.
Okay.
Claire, can I just jump in for my
Yes,
students?
please.
When they use Grammarly, it does come up as AI in Turnitin because it is AI changing the
Okay, there you go.
information.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to change anything, you physically have to rewrite statements because all that Grammarly checks comes up with turn it in. I've got international students who get it. They write in their language and translate to English, and it comes up as AI.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. I suppose you're answering the question, Nadine, much better than I was, because what I was thinking about really was, the way when you read something and it just sounds so AI. So it might be factually correct, but you're just like, it just literally sounds like it was produced by a robot. And so I was thinking more in those kind of situations, it can be really useful to use a tool like Grammarly. But absolutely, from a plagiarism perspective, and using Canvas or Turnitin, yeah, you are going to again get a hit for plagiarism. So thank you, Imran. I hope that answers your question. And Nadine, thank you so much. That's incredibly helpful. So anything else we could add to this to make this prompt more effective? Target audience, yeah, absolutely the target audience. Yeah, we could also add the field. So, is it like any field we're looking at? Is it a particular field? Like, what about the theoretical perspective? So, like with the theoretical perspective that the authors are writing from, or it could be the use of AI for other researchers working within particular theoretical perspectives. Okay, so just
I personally would add my search data, so the articles. I've just had so many problems with hallucinations that I'd want to put in my own data for it to look at.
Absolutely. And so that's really why we are doing this, is really looking at. So what we're going to do in a moment is have a go at doing this and look at what it gives us back. Because again, there absolutely is that point where a lot of what we get back may be hallucination. So really thinking about then that question. And so we'll look at other ways of actually, finding the literature. But if we are using, a large language model, if we're using ChatGPT or Perplexity to find the literature, again, what is the kind of prompt that we want to give it, and what kinds of what kinds of papers is it going to return to us, and to what extent are they hallucinations or not. So we're just going to have just consider that. So thinking about how we could make the prompt better and having a go then at actually getting that output. So 3 key authors and 2 key controversies. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize this for a moment. So I've stopped sharing that, so just bear with me. So even if we were to, let's say we're going to go into, let me open ChatGPT. Let me share my screen. Okay, so if you want to go into new chat, so we can see here I've got a lot of my own GPTs down the side for a range of different things. I've actually got one, as you can see there, my top GPT is actually a prompt craft assistant. So that I've actually saved that GPT, that I use that to help me with prompts for other GPTs. So it always applies that craft framework for the creation of GPT. So as you can see there, lots of different GPTs that I use. But if I was going to say put this in here, so your research assistant map the key debates in the use of AI in qualitative research, let's say since 2020. So again, the prompt is really vague, but what I want you to do, I'm going to give you a few minutes and I just want you to mess around with different prompts. So if we make it really vague, what's it going to give back? If we specify the field, what's it going to give back? Okay, so it's thinking. You can see it's going through all of these different libraries. Okay, so it's working through and okay, so it's telling me to thought for 35 seconds. So this is, and I'll stick to core arguments, not the hype. Okay, so this is what it's giving me back. Okay, so we can see quite a bit there. Again, so I didn't specify the output. So it's giving me quite a lengthy response. Okay, and it's giving me 4. So it's given me, it's given me quite a few. It's still going. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of show you that was the prompt, me running that prompt there. Can everyone see perplexity on my screen? Yeah. Okay, so again, if I run the same search in perplexity. Okay, so we can see. Oh, I didn't mean to put the image in. That was my bad. Okay, so anyway, so what I'm going to get you to have a go at. So if you would like to have a go at this activity I'm going to put you back into your breakout rooms. How do I get, let's get that image out of there. And what I'd like you to do is for maybe have a go at changing the prompt in terms of just making it more refined. Okay. So we can see there, this is what perplexity is giving me. Okay, so if you can make the prompt a little bit more refined, a little bit clearer. And so if one person wants to have a go at using chat, if another person wants to have a go at using perplexity, and then I just want to have you to have a conversation then about how the results might be similar or different. So I'm just going to stop sharing that for a moment. Let's just go back to our slides. Okay, so if you'd like to take a photo of the slide, so your research assistant map the key debates, 3 key authors and 2 key controversies. Okay, so did one of them feel useful for scoping? How would you verify or follow up in the output? What about fabricated citations or vague claims? And strength and limitation. So I'm not going to give you a great deal of time to do this. So you don't need to answer those questions in detail. I just want you to have a go at I'm going to copy the prompt into. So that's a prompt we had on the slide. Okay, so I've just copied that into the chat. So as I said, if you want to just refine the prompt, and one person, yeah, absolutely. Let's go with 2020. So one person can pop into ChatGPT, another person, or if there's 3 people in your group, 2 ChatGPT, 1 Perplexity, I don't mind, whatever you're more comfortable with. And then just having a chat about across and those 2 different tools, what was different. Okay, so again, we have those questions. Where is my share? So I'm just going to put that back up there for people just to take a photo of that if they haven't already. Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to open up those rooms. I'll give you maybe about 5 minutes. As I said, I don't want you to kind of go through the questions in a great deal of detail, but just getting a feel for what might be different or what is actually useful or not useful about using these tools for this type of a task. Okay.
Hi, Claire. I don't think everyone got put into a breakout, or it's just been really slow.
I'll pop you into room 4.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks so much. Okay, great. So we're just coming back to the main room. Okay, so how do people go with that? So let's look at some of the questions. Did you ever get an opportunity to, with their group, use the search on both of Perplexity and ChatGPT? Yeah, could I get some thumbs up? Yeah, normally I would pop around the breakout rooms, but given my technology issues this morning, I wasn't going to yeah, to do that. So I'd love if people would like to report back on any of these questions. So which felt more useful for scoping? Nadine, just picking up on your point about verifying or following up the output or fabricated citations or vague claims. I'd love if anyone would like to share how they found this activity.
I'm happy to share if no one else wants to. We
Right,
didn't
thank
get
you.
this from both tools, but we used Perplexity, and it seemed to be really good in finding the different sources and linking to different sources that it pulled the information from. The 3 key authors that we found were R.T. Williams, Fries, and P.A. Christou. I'm not sure if anyone got anything different, but we thought it was pretty good and answered the prompt properly.
So did you refine the prompt at all?
We just put in the same prompt and then
Yeah, perfect.
gave the time frame of 2020, but yeah, we use the same one.
Yeah, great. And so again, and it was very similar, I think, to my results. So the prompt obviously isn't fantastic, but in
Yeah.
terms of that scoping and discovery and maybe not knowing about a field. So this is really doing that kind of exploratory work where we don't know who the key authors are. We don't know, we don't know the field and we just want to get a sense for what that looks like. It can yield some really interesting results. Um,
Claire, I just found something quite interesting.
great.
So, with ChatGPT, I put in the same prompt twice, and it gave me 2 completely different responses. However, I was just going through checking the citations that it gave me. Now, one of the citations I clicked on would not go any further unless I clicked the little link that said that I was human. So I'm seeing that more increasingly that publishers are protecting their data by having some kind of prompt to verify that you're human. So then that leads me to believe that if ChatGPT could not click the prompt, is it now just making up the data? I'm stuck on the hallucinations. My trust levels are like in the negative zone.
Look, understandably, and I think it's really, really good to have that, critical skepticism in terms of we know that hallucinations are real. Like we know that, as I said, up to 20% of the citations you're given may be hallucinations, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. So I think it is really, really important to have that skepticism. Like really what we're talking about here is that kind of thing of, scoping the field. We're looking at an area that we really don't have a knowledge base in, and we're just getting a sense of, who are the key authors, what are the key controversies. And so really the point of doing this task is to get a sense of where are the tools useful, where are they not useful. So Nadine, to your point, I think often where they are useful is in terms of giving us those broad fields and those debates and getting a sense of what the landscape looks like with the authors. Like nothing that any AI gives me, I'm going to believe without verifying it. So I will make sure always I verify those. But it's really, I suppose, getting a sense of what those strengths and limitations are. Would anyone else like to come in on this, or any of their experiences of doing that task?
I'll share what I experienced. Sorry,
Great,
my
thanks, Jackie.
video's not on. So I chucked the same prompt into both Perplexity and ChatGPT just to see the output from the two different platforms. And they gave me some similarities to each other and some differences. So in terms of, I guess for me personally, in terms of scoping a field that I've got limited knowledge in, I got a greater level of detail, I guess, about the key debates from ChatGPT. And it
Okay.
had links, external links to take me out to the actual publications that the information had come from. I just thought it was interesting that the two tools gave me one author in common, but two that weren't. And then based on chatting with Nadine, I did the same. I decided to replicate the prompt in Perplexity and got completely different output the second time. But then I sort of reflected on that, okay, well, obviously there's more than 3 key authors and 2 key debates, 2 key controversies. So if I'm going to put the same prompt in a second time, why wouldn't it then return me 3 different authors and 2 different key controversies? Because the field is bigger than that. So maybe
Absolutely.
the limit that I'd placed on the results that I wanted is also what's behind the different output in a second prompt that's exactly the same.
Yeah, thank you. And though you've made some really good points. And I think one of them is, again, thinking about the parameters of our prompt. So by using those words, we're asking for a very set number. What's interesting as well is, as you saw from my search on ChatGPT, that it gave me like 5 key debates, which I thought was quite interesting. But again, I have a paid version of ChatGPT, and so from using it, many, many times for different things, I'm wondering, is it like it's expecting me to want more? I don't know. But again, there's me kind of suggesting that it's feeling something. But it is, yeah, it's really interesting that you will get different output on the same question, different occasions, different output. And what you might also find is you run a search and the output you get is actually really good. And the debates, they're explained really well. It's really meaty and it's really informative. You might run the same search 2 days later, and what you get back can honestly just feel like a lot of fluff. So it really is that thing of, again, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, identifying what about this is useful, but how can I verify the claims that are being made, and recognizing what those strengths and what those limitations are. And thinking, sorry, I'm just going to mute. Sorry, if people could just put themselves on mute, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, just thinking about what are the the strengths and limitations, and when we've got those citations that are not accurate, it just tells us that we always need to check that we may have those hallucinations. Okay, I'm aware of the time. I know that people have made themselves available up until 2:00 my time. I'm not sure if people can stay a little bit over. But shall we take a 5-minute break? Does that sound okay for everyone? I'm very happy if anyone wants to comment on that or give me a thumbs up, or I've got a thumbs up. Is that okay? I know it's not very long, and my apologies, it's quite a short break, but just give people an opportunity to stretch their legs, grab a drink. Yeah, okay, great. I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes, and I'll see everyone back here in 5. Thanks so much, everyone. Okay, welcome back. And now that was a very short break. I hope people had an opportunity to stretch their legs. So we might continue if that is okay for everybody. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is organization and mapping. And so why are we doing this? So obviously we need to make sense of the literature that we found. So if we've, done that discovery and we found some literature, so grouping, sorting, and mapping the literature based on relevance, method, theory, or population. So grouping papers into either thematic or methodological clusters, identifying patterns, gaps, and contradictions. So really starting to get a sense of the structure of the literature review or conceptual framework. So we don't want to, have a literature review that basically is just a description. We want to have that synthesis and augmentation. So we need to, first of all, organize and map our literature. And so if we're doing a task like this, how can AI be useful? So what kind of tools might we use? So we've mentioned already elicit, and this is really good when we already have a focused topic and we want to compare different studies. So not just looking at one paper, but a number of different papers. So synthesizing evidence, comparison of studies, and we could have it filtered. So filtered by method, sample, findings. And this is really good for building, for example, summary tables. This is best used for papers that we know, and it can be useful for creating evidence tables, mapping by things like method and population. Again, we have our ChatGPT where we can upload our papers and ask it to group the papers according to patterns, thematic grouping. It could be about key findings, it could be a particular area, it could be methodology, whatever it is. The prompt is, can be really flexible. It can be good for clustering and also for helping us rewrite summaries. Again, back to this problem of inventing or misinterpreting, making sure that we're cross-checking with our original texts. Useful for grouping studies, comparing themes, summarizing papers. So that's two of the tools that are really helpful for this. We've also then got Claude. Claude is great. It's another large language model. It's great for summarizing long texts and for pattern identification. So full articles or multiple abstracts. Again, we still need checking. We may have oversimplification of, core arguments or distinctions across the literature. Great for comparing papers and summarizing large content. We can also here use our reference managers. So there's obviously lots of different reference manager tools, like, for example, EndNote. So using a citation and PDF organizational tool to help us structure our literature review outline and having those PDFs, saved in one place. So again, making sure our human judgment is always front and center, but can be really helpful for helping build our structure for writing and for noting down patterns and different tensions. But we can see here that we're engaged more, there's more manual work, if you like, if we're using a reference manager. But these are some of the key ways that we can use AI for this. So let's have a look at an activity. So using AI to summarize a paper. So what I'd like you to do, so to look at the effectiveness of AI for summarizing a paper, is pick a paper that you know really well. So this could be a paper that you have published. It could be, a core paper that is part of, informing your research at the moment, but a paper that you're really familiar with. And so when I'm saying, sorry, I'm falling over my words here, and paste the full text of the paper, you can upload the PDF, or you can copy and paste the body of the paper, okay? So because we're just using one paper for this particular task, we're going to use either ChatGPT or Claude, okay? We'll move on to elicit in a moment. So what we're going to look at is a summary of the methods, the findings, and limitations. You could also ask for the theoretical framework. So let me just copy the prompt here and I'll post it in the chat. Let me just find my bear with me, thank you. So okay, I'm just going to put the theoretical framework here. Okay, so summarize this article, research design, I'm going to put in there as well, theoretical framework, key findings. Okay. So given that we've just had a go at ChatGPT, so what I might ask people to do is have a go at this using Claude. I'm going to just share my screen. Let's just find my... Okay, so here's Claude. So again, it's super user friendly. We've got the, you know, the back at it. How can I help you today? So if I paste in here, that is not what I want. If I paste in here, again, that is my prompt. So I'm asking for, no, I don't want that. Oh, it's not giving me what I want. Oh my goodness, hang on. Sorry, people. Let's remove that. Okay, so mine is very glitchy and very slow. I'm not quite sure why. But what I would like people to do is, as I said, choose a paper that you know really well. It could be, you know, your own paper or a paper that you're really familiar with through your research. Use the prompts and pop it into Claude and see what it gives back. I'm going to stop sharing that because that is just frozen on me. And what I want us to be thinking about is, so given that you know this paper really well, looking at what you're given back. So did AI miss anything important or misrepresent any aspects of the paper? And how would you validate or cross-check this summary? So again, if you know it really well, you may not need to do that. But yeah, so just have a go at either copying the body of the paper or just uploading the PDF. So just attaching the PDF into Claude. I'll just give people a minute or two to get started with that. Okay, so how did we go with that? Let me just share my slides. Okay, so using Claude, would anyone like to share how that activity worked out? So it looks good, Claude was good, missed quite a few things in key findings. We did limit it to 150 words. That's so interesting. And that's the thing as well. Again, it's that thing of playing around with the prompt. So if you say, you know, give me the top 5 key takeaways or the top 3, or, you know, give me a 200-word summary versus a 100-word summary. What are the kinds of things that it's going to include? What's it going to miss? Anyone else like to comment on this? Okay, an error in really an overgeneralization of the key findings. Okay, and so again, I think that brings us back to that point of nuance, and really us thinking about what it is that AI is doing. Again, it's predicting based on what it's being fed, so it's not really holding complexity, thinking about nuance. We often have that kind of overgeneralization. How I think about AI usually is just that kind of thing of a very broad brush approach. Okay. And if we think about what we're doing as qualitative researchers, it's, you know, this point of frequency or size is not an indication of importance in qualitative research. Okay. So again, if we're talking about the frequency or the size of something, we're really sitting within that quantitative space. Within a big Q qualitative paradigm, frequency or size is not the thing that gives meaning, okay, or gives value. But again, if we're thinking about then using AI, we can see how that kind of positivist framing is coming to the fore, and we can have those overgeneralizations, and often that is based around, you know, frequency, size, dominant norms, dominant narratives. Claude returned correct information. Fantastic. I'd just like to ask, does anyone else want to comment on this? No, everyone's good. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so let's have a look at exploring relationships and gaps, and we're going to move into then. Sorry, just bear with me 1 second. Okay, sorry, I wanted to just have a quick look at this before we move on to the next section. So we have just done this activity where we're talking about pasting the full text of familiar paper. Okay, and we said if we're looking at a single paper, a tool like ChatGPT or Claude is going to be most effective. Elicit is more effective if we're summarizing a few different research papers. Okay. So, for example, asking AI to summarize 3 to 5 studies on your research topic. Okay, again, an example prompt. So, group these studies by methodology and summarize key similarities or differences. And so, again, our questions will be thinking about how the output might be similar or different to your understanding. What was useful or misleading, and what would you refine or follow up? So it's really useful to do any of these activities. I'm just going to stop sharing this for a moment. It's really useful to do any of these activities with research that you know really well, because then you kind of get a sense of how the tools are actually working. What are the kinds of things that are, strengths are going to be really helpful? What are some of those limitations or weaknesses and things that you really need to watch out for? So I've just run a search in Elicit when you were doing the last activity. So the search was the search from our slides. So group these studies by methodology, summarize key differences or similarities. So the 3 papers that I put in were quite different, but they're all about sex education. So sexuality education in schools. So a couple of things I just want to note. So one, with Elicit, you can no longer put in full PDFs. Okay, so you actually need to copy and paste the whole body of the paper, okay, or whatever it is, a chapter, whatever, but you need to copy and paste the whole body into the search. So really annoyingly, you can't attach PDFs anymore. I'm on the free version of Elicit, so I'm guessing that is different with the paid version. So what we can see here is it's given me a bit of a summary there about the 3 papers, a breakdown by methodology. So just as I said, the studies were really, really different. A breakdown in terms of the methodology of the papers. And it's given me then, it's found 10 similar papers, and it's given me summaries of those other papers. Okay, so we can see that it is useful in terms of summarizing the papers that we're asking you to summarize, but also then suggesting other citations and other related work. So I'm not going to stay with this too long because, again, I am aware of the time.
So
But just
Claire,
think about,
sorry.
yes, you go, absolutely.
Yes, please. So where did you paste the whole paper? Did you paste 3 papers in?
I pasted the 3 papers in. So as I said, you can't attach the PDF. So I literally just copied and pasted a body. I put the question, and then, so I literally put the prompt in, and then I put in the 3. Sorry, I thought my camera was off. It's my other one. I put in the prompt, and then I literally copied the entire papers.
One by one? Like all
one
3,
by
one
one,
by
and
one?
then I press search. So let me
Can you just show me what did you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I literally put in the prompt. So let me just quickly. So that was my prompt. And then I got my paper. So literally copy and paste. Okay, so that's one paper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, then my next paper.
Okay, that's all right. That's all I wanted to see. I don't want to
Yeah,
waste your
so
time. Yes,
literally
that's all
copying
good.
the body of the papers, and even with the two there, you can see it took kind of about 30 seconds or so for it to think through and give me the results. But you see that kind of happens. And so it'll give me the grouping. You can see it's still thinking there. So the grouping in relation to the prompt.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, great. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen. So we can see that it's starting to come back there with the results.
Sorry, is this one of the ones that can then direct you to other similar papers?
Yes, it is, absolutely. And so sorry, I'm
Beautiful.
going to share that again. So we can see here then this paper. So this is not one of the papers that I uploaded,
Very
but
cool.
this is a similar paper. And so when I say it's a similar paper, it's a relevant paper. Okay, so I can save it to my library. So this again is a free version. Okay, so I can save that to my library. I can save as plain text or PDF. I can download it. If I want to go back there, there is again. So this is all about, as I said, kind of a sexual health and adolescent focus. So that's a summary that it's given me of that paper. Please use the above links to see more. So open source in a new tab. So it's bringing me to that paper then. That's in Semantic Scholar. So Elicit sits on Semantic Scholar. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see how this could be really useful for me because I've
Yeah,
done some
yeah.
searching and I've got a bunch of papers, but I might have missed stuff. So if I ask Elicit to summarize and categorize them, it'll then show me what
Absolutely.
I've missed.
Yeah, exactly. And you can use different filters. You can sort it into columns. Upgrade to Plus for export options. So and I think sometimes as well, sometimes if we want to do a particular task, it can be, worthwhile to, even if we, pay for a month, like it can be just like, at the moment I need to do this particular thing. So yeah, so that might be helpful for you. But again, we can see there, we can go into the source so we can find all those other related papers. And the three papers that I uploaded were actually quite different. So I think if you're, uploading papers that are more related, you're going to get more comprehensive results. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that for a moment, and we're going to go back to our slides, and we are going to push on here. So I'm not going to get you to do that, but I hope that just gave you a bit of a flavor for what Elicit looks like and what it can do. So again, it's when we have a number of different papers we wanted to summarize, but also it will bring up then other related literature that we can access. Okay, so when we're talking about then exploring relationships and gaps in our literature, so we're obviously wanting to go here beyond description, identifying how studies relate to each other, where are the tensions, what gaps remain in the field. Okay, so we're like, for example, tracing influences across sources. So who built on whom, comparing different approaches, comparing findings, different theoretical lenses, but also thinking about what are some of the gaps that might be there, what are some of the silences, what about underrepresented voices. So really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get into the point of being synthesis. Okay, we're really thinking about, what are the relationships between all of these different pieces of research, thinking about, the theoretical lenses, and we want to really build a case for our research contribution and position our own work critically. Okay, so really thinking about how we can make sense of what those relationships and gaps are and how we can use AI to support and facilitate this. So what are some of the tools that we might want to use? So first of all, Research Rabbit, we're going to have a look at that in a moment. That can be really good for visual citation discovery and mapping of papers. So what it does is it creates a network and we can move forwards and backwards. So we can trace this particular paper has referenced all these other papers, and all of these other later papers have cited this particular paper. So it's really great for interdisciplinary work. We can find unexpected connections. It's very visual and interactive. As I mentioned earlier, it can lead to citation spirals. So we can kind of get lost in a bit of a tangent. So that's just something to watch out for there with Research Rabbit. But it's great for if you want to trace forward and backwards connections from a known article and understand its scholarly context, even if it's not a known article. But just be careful, as I said, about kind of falling down those rabbit holes. Haha, pardon the pun. Another one that's really useful is connected papers. This is really user-friendly and very, easy to use. Great for discovering related work through co-citation mapping. It's fast, intuitive, and if we put in a seed paper, it will give us again those neighboring papers. It doesn't show citation direction. So while Research Rabbit shows us that direction, whether it's forwards or backwards, Connected Papers doesn't. It may miss kind of more critical or niche papers. This can be really useful when we're scoping related topics or we're looking to broaden a conceptual cluster. Lit maps is another one. This is the free version is not particularly extensive, so if you're interested in using this, it would very much kind of be the paid version. It has got a more complex interface. It's really good if we want to build a evolving dynamic map of research over time. But I think that Research Rabbit and Connected Papers are probably more user-friendly. Again, we've got our usual suspects, so Claude and ChatGPT. Really good for, again, processing multiple abstracts and highlighting agreement, disagreement, and ChatGPT, again, summarizing and synthesizing relationships. So it can be good for identifying tensions, summarizing scholarly conversations, but it may overstate agreement or coherence. And again, that kind of thing of being prone to hallucinations, we've got to be careful with that. So I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm going to go back to my browser and let's go into, is that, sorry, just this is the point where you realize you have too many windows open. Let me just close some of these windows. Okay, so that is the one we have open on illicit. Okay, so that was our illicit screen. Let's go ahead and have a look at Research Rabbit. So that is over here. Now, I'm not sure if people are familiar with this or have used it before. Let me just log in here. Okay, so with the free version, you can save one collection. So within a collection, within a project, you can save one project. Within a project, you can have many different collections, but only one project within the free version. So we're going to put in a title, a DOI or keyword. So let me find, this is one of the papers that we found a few minutes ago in illicit. So let's put this paper in here and hit search. Okay, so We want to choose find related articles. Hang on. Sorry, let me just. And it can tell us here, we can see these two little rabbits. So that basically tells us how many different iterations of this task we have done. Now, sorry, I have something on my screen there that's not making this visible. Okay, let me choose a different paper. Let me pop this one in. Okay, let's just go back. Let's get out of that. Okay, I'm doing something wrong. Let me just, okay, so can I move that screen? No, I can't. I want to just show you the networks here. I unfortunately have got something on my screen that is not enabling me to see what's in the bottom right-hand corner. So that is, yes, causing me a bit of bother, but let's push on and let's have a look at this. So that paper there, so what we can see is it's given us then a map in terms of these are citations from this paper. Okay, so from this paper here, so this is the paper we uploaded. And so what we can see here is, and two, I can't remember who asked the question before, but about having, papers in a field and wanting to map that field more broadly, we can see here that if we put in a paper within Research Rabbit, it enables us to see not just the references that are within that paper, but all of the citations. So it enables us to kind of move backwards and forwards through that. So with any of those papers, we can hover over it. We can see the title of the paper, get some information on that. And then we can just click on that paper. Now we can save that paper to our collection. So as I said, within the free version is just one project, but within that project, we can have a number of different collections. So let's say I want to save that into a new collection. So that is about using, let's call it AI in schools. Okay, and I want to save that as red. And then that paper then is, so that is now in a new collection. And that's, we've saved that over there. So we can see, so if we want to start with this paper, we can click on that and it will actually bring us into the PDF or the text of the literature. So here we can look at, sorry, it's not allowing me to click on that. I'm so sorry about this. Okay, so there is that paper, and we can see all now of the research that has been cited by that paper. Okay, so again, if we hover over each of those papers, we get a bit of an overview. If we click on the paper, so this is, we've moved into the area of socially interactive robots, which is similar to the paper that we just accessed. And again, we can save that to our collection there. We can click on it to access the paper. So that will bring up the link to the paper. But we can see that we can use this citation map to move backwards and forwards, and it's going to give us more recently published, more more previously published. So we can kind of zoom in or zoom out, and we can get more information here on our graph, what's actually happening. So we can look at what, and also as well, really importantly, so as I said, we can use it to go both directions, forwards and backwards, but we can see here as well that there is 1,400 similar papers, okay? So we can locate this paper here in a web of other papers. So we can see how, you know, you could potentially fall down a bit of a rabbit hole, but it's just a really good way to visually see how papers are related to each other. And so this here, this I have a Virginia Braun paper saved in the Research Rabbit library. And so it's making special note there to that paper because, and we can see the node for that paper is slightly bigger because that's a paper I've already got saved. So that is incredibly useful for getting a sense of how papers relate to other literature within the same field, but also with different fields and moving across different disciplines. So I'm not going to get used to do this now, just given our time constraints. I'm not sure if people will need to leave at 2 o'clock, and I'm guessing some people may need to leave at 2 o'clock. So I'm not going to get people to do that Research Rabbit task. But again, what you can do is, so you can put one of your articles in, it can be your own, whatever, but something that you know. And then, so it's always better, as I said, if you're trying these tools out, it's always better to start with an article that you know, rather than kind of going in blindly. And then using Research Rabbit, so looking at how we can do citations forwards and backwards, but also what is the similar literature in this field. So what you'll notice is, what are the clusters, what are the influences, but there may also be missing voices. So it's not necessarily going to capture everything. So what is not there, that is interesting. That's, again, if you're doing that with a piece of work that you're familiar with, you just get a much better understanding of what the strengths or limitations of the tool that you're using is. So when we're talking about summarizing versus synthesizing with our literature, obviously summarizing, we're talking about individual sources. Synthesizing, we're integrating sources. Summarizing, we're focusing on what the study says. Synthesizing on the relationship. So we're really clear about what the differences are between summarizing and synthesizing. And what we obviously want to do is we want to be synthesizing. And with synthesizing our arguments, we need to be engaging in interpretation. Okay. So again, remembering that what the AI is going to give us pretty much is going to be a summary, but it's not necessarily going to be synthesizing. Now, what we can do, so we can see here in this activity, we can ask it to synthesize. Okay. So with the task here, choose 3 non-papers or abstracts and ask it to. So again, we're not going to be able to unfortunately do this now, but what I'd really like you to do is at some point, later today. And what I can do actually is as well, before people sign off, I can just share the slides and the handout in the chat. I'm also happy to share my email address, and if you have any questions, follow-up questions, because again, I know that we haven't had a lot of time for questions. I'm really happy to respond to those. But just really thinking about, with your AI tool, is it more likely to summarize? And in terms of synthesizing, what are the kinds of ways that you could prompt it to do that? So we could ask, what are the main areas of agreement or disagreement? Where do tensions, gaps, or missing voices emerge? And asking what kind of conceptual or theoretical patterns that can be drawn across the papers. Okay, so again, have a go with this with 3 papers that you know. So really asking yourself then, what did AI capture well? In the summaries, where did the synthesis feel weak or generic? What interpretive decisions did you need to make with the synthesis? and how would your framing be different? Okay, so even, just really focusing here on literature that you know really well and just getting a sense of how is the output that it's providing different to your interpretation. And also just remembering that even if you're asking it to synthesize and it is giving you a synthesis, just remembering that it's not an actual synthesis. Of course, it may be something that looks like a synthesis, but it's not actually going to be synthesizing, okay? Because we need to remember, again, within that big Q qualitative research space and applying that framework, we need to think about our own context, our own positionality as researchers, and our own critical judgment. So again, and maintaining that cognitive sovereignty. Okay. So the last thing I just want to touch on briefly is citation integrity and reflexivity. So here we're making sure that the sources that we use are valid, are appropriately represented, and reflect, again, your critical and ethical stance as a researcher. So thinking about, deliberate, thoughtful, and explicit, making everything that you are doing transparent and explicit in your work, making sure you're verifying citations. Do they exist? Are they being used accurately? Recognizing hallucinations and oversimplifications. As I said, sometimes, using AI can just feel really broad brush. And what we actually, as qualitative researchers, want to do is we want to capture complexity, we want to capture nuance, we want to capture tension, and often AI can miss those things. Okay. Thinking about our own lens, our own background, and how our own lens. So when we're talking about our lens, we're talking about our theoretical perspective. All of the things that have shaped who we are in terms of us coming to our research. But then if we're using an AI tool, throwing that into the mix and thinking about how the tool can shape what is cited, so what is included or what is excluded. Okay. So usually, like if we're doing an analysis or we're working with data, and we're not using any AI or any kind of software, we're thinking about anything we're saying, any judgment that we're making is generated at the intersection of three things. So one of them is the data that we're working with. The second is our theoretical framework or the lens that we're reading the data through. The third is the data, the theoretical framework, and the third is your analytic resource. That is you as a researcher. That is your subjectivity. And that's why reflexivity is so important. If we're using AI tools to assist us with any aspect of our research, there's a fourth thing there that needs to be considered. Okay. And so we need to consider how the tool is going to shape what is included, what is excluded, because fundamentally, this is what gets put out into the world as knowledge. So thinking about how AI can potentially distort citation. So just making sure that we are maintaining rigor and ethical accountability. So what kind of tools can we use for this? So again, if we're thinking about Claude, can be great for thematic patterns, can process multiple abstracts papers at once, highlighting agreements. But again, we can see where we have that flattening of nuance. Skite is another really useful tool. This is for verification of citations. Okay, so validating citations, checking the claim strength. It can be really useful for flagging disputed or supported citations. So with Skite, it includes real publication links. So like, Skite might tell us, this particular paper agrees with or builds on the findings from this other paper, okay? It might tell us this particular paper disagrees with or refutes or presents opposing evidence to this other paper. It can tell us this paper, cited this other work, but doesn't clearly agree or disagree. So Yeah, with Skype, it shows how a citation is used. It shows how a citation is supported, and how a citation might be contradicted, or that a citation is mentioned. Google Scholar is actually incredibly handy, but that only shows us citation count, so it doesn't actually show us anything else. Okay, it doesn't. It doesn't analyze how a source is used, and it requires our manual reading of each cited article. Okay. And also Google Scholar doesn't make a distinction between types of articles, whereas a AI tool like Skype will allow us to search for studies that support or dispute a particular topic or a particular finding. So much more fine-grained.
Claire, can I just ask
Yeah.
a quick question? So can you use Clyde? Was it what was it? The
Right.
first one on the last slide. Claude. Can we use it for thematic analysis of the data?
Yeah, so look, with thematic analysis, so it depends on, yes, you can get it to give you thematic patterns. The thing with thematic analysis is it just depends on what your theoretical perspective is. But in theory, yes, you can get Claude to help you with thematic patterns. And that could be across a data set, it could be across literature, and you could also use ChatGPT in exactly the same way. So you could input a data set, you could input literature and ask it for thematic patterns. And again, thinking about your prompt and making your prompt, being really clear on what your boundaries are and what exactly you're looking for. You could ask it to give thematic patterns based on, tensions, contradictions, whatever it is specifically.
Yep,
Does that
great.
answer your
Thank you.
question?
Yes,
Yeah, no
please.
worries at
Thank you.
all. No worries at all. Thank you. So again, unfortunately, we don't have time to do this, but this is just really looking at the question of, can you trust a particular source? Okay. So what you could do is ask ChatGPT or Claude to generate a short literature paragraph on a topic that you know. So for example, telling it you're a qualitative research assistant, asking it to write a 150-word literature review paragraph on a particular topic. Include at least 3 scholarly citations from the last 5 years, for example, and then checking if those citations exist in, Google Scholar. So again, what we can see here is back to the question of hallucinations. Okay, so the citations may or may not be real. The citations may be real, but maybe they don't actually match what has been claimed. Okay, so just because a citation is real, we need to check that the knowledge claim that the AI is telling us has come from that citation is actually what the paper actually said. And thinking about then, if we're using AI generated references, whose responsibility is it? So where does the responsibility lie with us as researchers? So that brings us to the end of our time together. So really, I suppose the take homes that I want you to really consider is that AI can support but not replace our critical engagement with literature. So we can use it to accelerate routine tasks, but not to interpret and not to reason. Okay, prompt clarity is absolutely vital. So well-structured prompts will yield more accurate outputs. Again, thinking about garbage in, garbage out. Summarizing is not synthesis. So often the AI will give you surface level themes, but really what we want to do is weave them into a coherent argument. And no matter what we're doing with our research, we obviously need to make sure that we understand our data and the literature that we are working with, back to front and inside out. So what we don't want is AI to be ever acting as kind of a mediator between us and our research process. We always need that immersion in the data and that immersion in the literature. Okay, we can use tools like Skype and Google Scholars or manual checks to confirm accuracy. Thinking about as well how AI aligns or conflicts with your research paradigm. So again, AI is very much sitting within that positivist space, okay, that kind of objective reality. And most qualitative research does not sit within that epistemological space or within research paradigms that are in that space. So just really reflecting on that and thinking, what does that mean for your research? Making sure that your lens, your judgment, and your context, and the context within which the data was collected, remains absolutely central. So if we're using AI in the loop, how can we use AI in ways that maintain our reflexivity and maintain our accountability? So, one of the things that I think is really important, you don't need to be able to master AI to use it well. Like, you don't have to be an expert. I think what's really key is identifying, what are the tasks that you're needing to do? And then for each particular task, is it useful or not for me to use AI? If so, what are the different types of AI I could use? And then making decisions around, which one am I going to choose? What are the strengths and the limitations? And making sure, your judgment is central. You're still immersed in the work that you're doing and maintaining, as we said, cognitive sovereignty. And I think that's just a really useful term to kind of keep in your mind. Am I flexing my brain muscles? Am I using my cognitive sovereignty? Am I maintaining my cognitive sovereignty? And that epistemic humility. So recognizing that AI is recognizing patterns, it's not ever able to do that interpretive work, and that's what we're doing. So that's kind of it for me. Again, I do want to apologize about our very late start and really thank people for being so patient and just really it was a very unexpected beginning to our session today, but I really, really do greatly appreciate your patience and your contributions. My email address is on this final slide. I'm very aware we rushed through those last slides very quickly, so you're very, very welcome to reach out, send me an email if there's anything that you want to check or you want to follow up with me. I'm going to share in the chat. I'm going to share the slides. I know that they were sent out earlier, but I'm just going to share them here as well so that people have them at their fingertips. Bear with me. That was just the handout, which really just gave space for those questions. I will also share, I'll share a document with you which just gives a bit of an overview of those tools that we've looked at today, and I'll also share the reference list from the training. So I'll make sure that I get those out to you, and it's been absolutely my pleasure. It's been wonderful working with you all, and thank you so much, and thank you for your lovely feedback as well. I really appreciate it. I know people need to leave, so thank you. It's been absolutely my pleasure, and I hope to stay in touch with you all. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.